This is your Friday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Got some good stuff coming up here in just a little bit. Alan Horton, Timberwolves radio voice for the last 14 years. This is year 15 for Alan Horton. Could not believe that. I'm going to talk to him for a segment on this show. He'll be coming up in just a few minutes here, as will Mark Craig, Star Tribune, NFL. Vikings writer, does their weekly picks segment. Has some interesting thoughts on the Vikings against Detroit game. Thinks that one will go down to the wire, as many Vikings games, and honestly, as a lot of Lions games have gone this season, surprisingly, considering that team still does not have a victory. Also get into Brian Kelly's viral moment, creating a new voice for himself now that he is the head coach at LSU. But first, what did I miss? From where I sit right now, there were two big stories in Minnesota sports on Thursday. One of them, actually both of them, emerging fairly late. Let's start with the playing surface first. Wild staying hot. Ryan Hartman, who is on Thursday's show. If you didn't get a chance to listen to that, please go back and listen to Thursday's show. Had him on Daily Delivery. Leads the Wild in goals now with 13. Added another one in the 5-2 win over New Jersey on Thursday night. Ryan Hartman, a +4 on the night, also had 2 assists on the game. Kirill Kaprizov, 2 goals in the game. Just another all-around very good performance by the Wild. Solid night in net for Kaapo Kähkönen, making back-to-back starts, giving Cam Talbot a little bit of time off in the early part of the season here. There's not much more we can say superlative-wise about the Wild. It's just as they keep stacking win after win like this together and, relentlessly looking like they're dangerous on every shift, a threat to score on pretty much every shift, putting up 4 goals, 5 goals in this case a game. The conversation's going to shift pretty soon. It's not just going to be a nice little story. It's as they move up in the West, as they, attain a pretty prominent spot in the Western Conference, we're going to have to start talking, if this keeps up for another 10, 15 games, about, bigger thoughts about where this season could go. And again, it's early. They're only, 23 games in, 16-6-1, a very good start, looking very promising. Like to see it for about a half a season before we get too excited. But right now, my goodness, this is a very fun team to watch, and they seem to have a certain mix of ingredients that could bode well for them as the season goes along and even into the playoffs. So it's an exciting team to watch right now. I don't know what more we can say about it other than they are appealing in a lot of ways, and I hope people are enjoying the season so far, because it's been a lot of fun. Other big story that emerged later Thursday, Gophers and PJ Fleck pursuing a reunion with offensive coordinator Kirk Soraka. Had a lot of success with him here in 2018 and specifically 2019. Tanner Morgan flourished. Soraka went to Penn State, didn't work out there, and he left there. He's basically in line to come here, getting the band back together, as Randy Johnson wrote in his story on StarTribune.com. It's interesting, makes a lot of sense, considering Tanner Morgan is coming back for another season, considering the amount of success they've had together. Chip Scoggins had a good column too. It can't just be a new offensive coordinator. It's got to be a better balance on offense. Too much emphasis on the running game this year. Not enough trust in the pass game and some of the options they had there. But bringing an old face back in this case, I think it makes a lot of sense given the amount of success Soraka had here with the Gophers and specifically with Tanner Morgan. Curious to see, too, if the Gophers, what they might do in the transfer portal this offseason. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of quarterback depth right now, even with Tanner Morgan coming back. Wonder if they're kind of all in on Tanner Morgan, or if they're looking for a little bit more depth there as well. This is no insiding or anything, just kind of looking at the quarterback room, how they lost 2 guys to the portal when Morgan came back, wondering if there could be more options there as well. But the bigger news right now, Kirk Soraka would not surprise anyone. Didn't surprise anyone, I guess, the thought that could happen, and it sounds like that is even closer to happening as of Thursday night.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Rubio off to Love. Oh, that's a foul! David Guthrie is right there. He didn't have the guts to call it. Also, Ed Malloy!
That was just a little clip from a famous Alan Horton moment from about 8 years ago. Asked him about it on the interview that I'm about to play for you right now. Really excited to be joined today on Daily Delivery by Alan Horton, Timberwolves radio voice since 2007. Man, that sounds like a long time. This is then your 14th, 15th season doing this?
Yeah, so 15th year. Yep. It does sound like a long time. It feels like a long time sometimes.
It probably does. I've been watching a lot of the same games that you have, although your job takes you more directly into that sphere. I want to talk to you about this year's team, which has maybe more intrigue than some of the ones you've watched over the years. And I want to talk a little bit, though, at the beginning, just about kind of your journey and what you've seen, especially since you took this job in 2007. Start off maybe just kind of big picture, like, you've got, one of a handful of very enviable jobs in the NBA. How did you get to this point? You can start wherever you want, but the finish for this question should be kind of like when you got the job.
Yeah, I think first off, Michael, thanks for having me, and thanks to your listeners too, saying they wanted to hear from me. That's always nice, and it's sometimes when you're doing these games alone, year after year after year, on some cold, dark nights, and you wonder who's actually listening out there. But it's great when fans do approach me and say how much they like listening to the games and tune in all the time. And even if it's just one person, that's enough to get me going. As long as one person is out there listening, that makes me extremely happy. So I grew up in Western Massachusetts in a small town. I went to a liberal arts school in upstate New York, kind of went out west to ski for a few years, just be a ski bum in Jackson, Wyoming, one of my favorite places in the world. And then I got serious and went back to school, and I went to Syracuse, which is where I really started in the mid 90s, getting into sports broadcasting and everything. And then the journey kind of took me from there to Vermont, to California for 10 years, LA and San Diego, and then up to Seattle and finally to Minnesota. But it wasn't always in basketball. It was in baseball. It was in football. I was doing any kind of sport I could to try to build up my resume. And that meant not only different play-by-play paths, but also, I worked as an analyst for a little bit in different sports. And I learned how to be behind the microphone too, and produce and engineer and do all those kind of things to kind of make yourself more valuable. And that really paid off when I got the Seattle job, because they had an opening for the Seattle Storm of WNBA, a play-by-play job. And there was a WNBA championship team in 2004. So this was a couple of years later in 2006, and I got that job. But there were hundreds of people that applied for that. But it also, you had to be able to be the executive producer of the Sonics radio network and know how to produce broadcasts and hook up a network and all the kind of technical stuff behind the scenes. And that really gave me a leg up on a lot of different people, because the guy who hired me, who's the radio voice of the Utah Jazz now, and David Locke, even said, we could have gone 100 different ways on the play-by-play voice. There were a lot of talented people. But what set you apart into a small group was that the fact that you could do all these other things behind the scenes. So that's where my resume kind of really paid off. And then when I was there in Seattle for a year, when I got the call and said Timberwolves were looking for a play-by-play man. And I got the job late in the year. It was in October when I finally got hired, and I drove from Seattle to Minnesota, and then I was in the office for 2 days, and I was on a plane. And 2 days later, I was doing a game with Billy McKinney, my former partner for 1 year. So it was kind of that's a long-winded answer to get to the fact that I've kind of bounced around all over the country, and I've just kind of enjoyed the ride.
You did Lynx games for a while here too,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. And, like you said, you did the games initially here with Billy McKinney, but you've been a solo operation for a lot of the time on the Timberwolves radio. What's it? I'm curious, what it's like kind of being the one person show, as opposed to, you get the TV crew with Dave Benz, Jim Peterson, and you've got also, I'm kind of curious, like how much of the behind the scenes work are you still doing in terms of like putting everything together? Not necessarily like pulling audio clips, but like, what are you doing in terms of setting up the entire broadcast and thinking about post game and things like that?
Yeah, really, it's been, and I'm glad you brought up the WNBA because I absolutely love the WNBA, and I loved being a part of the Seattle Storm for 1 year, and then watching the Lynx grow into the dynasty that they became with Cheryl Reeve. And with the Lynx, you're one of just about you're probably only about 16 people traveling, maybe 17, somewhere in there, small numbers. So you're really a part of the team. You're helping out, pulling bags off of buses, getting bags off of the conveyor belts. Cheryl was great because she let me in the coaches room after the game. We could hear all the coaches vent and what they're talking about and giving you insight into things. You really felt like you were a part of the team, and that was really cool. Especially winning a title in 2011, I guess was the first one. And then I was there for the next one in 2013. I guess it was the odd years, right? 11, 13, 15, 17.
Yes.
So that really was just such an educational experience. It's so great to be around these players and, sitting on commercial planes, and I'm wedged in between Maya Moore on my right and Lindsay Whalen on my left. I'm like, how much better does this get? And so, the first 2 years was really nice having a partner. Billy McKinney my first year, and then Kevin Lynch was my partner the second year. He had come over from the Gophers, and then they, ran into I think a downturn in the economy. Budgets changed, and all of a sudden Kevin's job was eliminated, and so it just kind of happened. But every time I think about maybe how long an NBA game is, I think back to some of my experiences I did San Diego State baseball for a number of years, 7-8 years, and I do those games all by myself. And college baseball is just, it's endless. It's the metal bat. I think they still have the metal bats, but I've done some games that have been 28, 27, just 4-hour marathons. So anytime I think about how long a Timberwolves game might be, it's nothing compared to what college baseball was. It's some of the days and nights I spent just calling games for 4 hours and filling that time. But it is, the analyst part went away. And so I tried to kind of keep an eye on some things that an analyst would. I paid more attention to who's on the floor, lineup combinations, matchups, kind of some strategy, more things that an analyst would kind of focus on. So I try to incorporate that into a broadcast. And we do use a lot of audio clips, and whether it's Cal Soderquist, our executive producer now, and John Folke before him, I work kind of hand in hand with them. We collect sound. We'll send it back and forth. I'll do interviews. They go to practice or cut up sound. He'll find sound of the opposing team, and then I kind of dump it into my audio system and organize it. And that way I can play sound coming out of breaks. I think it helps provide another voice. I get tired of listening to myself for 2.5 hours. So it's kind of nice just to be able to say, hey, here's Karl Anthony Towns on facing the Brooklyn Nets tonight, or here's what Ant had to say in his latest, spectacular post-game comment, something like that. And then I just, I plug away at work for pretty much however long of time we have before the next game. I end up using that time just to prepare. And if it's on the second of back-to-back, it's going to be less prep than a game where we have 2 days off in between. But once the season starts going, it's just a machine. It keeps rolling. And it's funny to spend so much time on one team, and then as soon as the game's over, you just move on and you're focused on the next team. Okay, what are the Brooklyn Nets doing? What's their trends? What are their storylines? And then after that, you've got the Atlanta Hawks. What's going on with them? Why are they not as good as they were last year? What's Trae Young doing? Those kind of things. So it's once that season starts going, it's incredible how quickly it moves along.
I get tired of my own voice after about 5 minutes. So I don't know how you do it for 2.5 hours, but in being in this job for a 15th season, you've obviously covered and seen a lot of memorable moments. You have not seen a excessive amount of winning. There's been one playoff season since you got here. I'm sure you're keenly aware of that. Some of the particularly lean years, when they're winning, in the teens for an entire season, how do you make it through that, aside from, just still enjoying your job, obviously, but it's got to get tough. I know it's tough as a writer to cover a team that's losing that much. It's got to be difficult to call games in that same fashion. Yeah, it is. There's no doubt about it. It makes it more difficult. And there's a balance. Like, you don't want to be so tied to the team that if the team doesn't do well, then you're just down in the dumps and you're in a funk and you can't get excited about things.
But yet, if you detach yourself from the team, well, then you lose kind of the passion and that connectivity to the team that the fans, I think, want you to have. So that's a difficult balance there. But we always approached it as, hey, if we can get through this season, if we ever start winning, our system of how we handle the broadcast and playing sound and things that we talk about and doing scoreboard updates and keeping people up to date on storylines, not just in our game, but around the NBA on a nightly basis, it's just going to be that much easier when we do win. And that happened in 2017, 2018 with that run to the postseason and how good that team was. But you just, you've got a show to put on every night. It's like having a talk show. And no matter whether the team's won 0 games or, won 50 games, you're still, your job is the same, no matter what the record is. And I always look at a game fresh. You never know what you're going to see. And it's amazing how often you see things that, man, I don't think I've ever seen that before. Or, wow, that takes me all the way back to 2008. I can remember some play that was similar to that. There's always storylines to talk about, whether it's team related. For the Timberwolves, a lot of it has been player related and development related. Hey, can Kevin Love develop into this type of player? What's Al Jefferson's strengths of his game, and can the Wolves build around him? What about Karl Anthony Towns? How do we surround him with pieces? What about Ant? What can he become? As such a dynamic young player, what can he become in the future? So there's always things to talk about, and we kind of focus on that. And once the game starts, hey, the records kind of go out the window. But it is nice. I will say it is nice to win games. It is, and this season, I think in particular, it's just been, the Wolves have been relevant. They're being talked about around the league. It's not an afterthought that the Timberwolves come in and play a team. And even the Washington game last night was competitive. It was fun. It mattered. This team is a game over 500. We can look at the standings now and say, okay, we're right in the thick of things. If we win this game, boy, if they had won last night, I think they would have been up to 4th in the West already. And that's only a couple of games over 500. And you can point back to so many games this year, Michael, where it's just, the team shouldn't have lost some of these games. They should be even better than where they are. But the way they've played overall, I think it's really encouraging. I think the fans have gotten behind this team. I think they've landed on the right coach and the right GM. May have gotten there in a very strange way, but I think they've landed on those two positions. And maybe in my 15 years, I feel more confident about those two positions and the people the Wolves have in charge of those two positions than I ever have before.
You mentioned you might see anything on a given night. One night you saw Sean Marion foul Kevin Love in the corner. Didn't get called. It's a moment that people bring up still, the Ed Malloy. You knew I had to talk about it. It's something you've had a great time kind of joking about and talking about over the years. What do people, how often does that still get, does that still come up even 8 years later? I will still get tweets occasionally from games where Ed Malloy is the referee and the Timberwolves aren't even involved. Like it's some Blazers Warriors matchup and some Blazers fans, hey, Wolves Radio, Ed Malloy in the building tonight. And it's just, I always like it. And you got to embrace it. I didn't know that's, something would become viral as a broadcaster. You hope it's the Al Michaels, do you believe in miracles? Yeah. I didn't know it'd be Ed Malloy, but hey, I'll take it. And it's just, what was nice about that was everybody I heard back from that listened to that liked it, expressed that I was expressing exactly how they felt. And that's, as a broadcaster, that's the best compliment you can get, because you're describing the action to them with the same kind of passion that they have. I try not to do it with just Timberwolves glasses on. I try to be fair about things, but when it comes down to that kind of play, that was a foul, and the league admitted it the next day, which doesn't change anything. But no, I've kind of embraced it. It's been fun, and anytime Ed Malloy, the game earlier this year where Ed Malloy teed up Karl Anthony Towns, there's that great photo of Ed Malloy walking in and Karl Anthony Towns behind him, just with his hands up, going, what? It's just a great photo. So I think you have to call it like you see it, and then you got to embrace what just happened. It's part of Timberwolves history, I guess. I want to get back to this year's team in a minute, but I also want to ask you, like, in terms of what you've seen over the years, like what are some of your favorite moments? And I know like I said, there's just been the one playoff appearance with the Jimmy Butler team. Maybe they make it 2 this year. I certainly think they're at least a play-in contender this year based on what we've seen through 22 games. But, in the midst of more losses than wins, there still are certainly highlights. What stands out to you from, 14 full seasons plus what's happened so far?
I think overall it's just I love the competitiveness of sports. And I think that translates from basketball to football to baseball to hockey. When you have a competitive game and 2 teams going at it and competing at a high level, I love that excitement. I love being in the building for that because the atmosphere is what makes that special. And while there haven't been enough of those, you'd love for every game to fit into that category. But that hasn't, obviously, with the Timberwolves over the last 15 years. But I think just there's a couple of games that stand out. Kevin Love had a game winner in the LA Clippers. I remember a great game that up in Portland. We've had some incredible games up there, and the atmosphere is so great. Portland's one of my favorite stops. Karl Anthony Towns hit a game winner there when Sam Mitchell was coach for that one season after Flip had passed. Even when the opponents do something, I still remember Carmelo Anthony scoring 37 points in a third quarter against the Wolves in Denver, which at the time tied the NBA record for most points in a quarter. I just never seen anything like that. And that was kind of before the Steph Curry and Klay Thompsons of the world. Even Kevin Love, I think, broke that record. We're just generating 8 threes in a quarter. I think Melo may have hit some threes during that stretch, but he did it in a host of different ways, and the Wolves just couldn't stop him. So that was memorable. There have been so many. I just think a lot of the road games where the atmosphere was so great and so tight. I guess the play-in game against Denver was spectacular at the end of the 17-18 season. Wolves haven't been able to beat the Nuggets since, by the way, which still irks me. It's like 8 or 9 straight wins for the Nuggets. I think Mike Malone still uses that. Even though there's probably nobody left on that Nuggets team that was still around from then, I think he still uses that as motivation for his squad. And then some of the big nights that, Wiggins has had, Towns has had, Anthony Edwards is just incredible. And just with his athleticism and the way he attacks at least once a game, you've seen it, Michael. He's looking to dunk on someone's head. Maybe once, twice, 3 times a game, he just attacks relentlessly. And his personality just kind of shines through. And so I guess, I don't know if I pointed out any great moments, but like Wiggins hit a shot in Oklahoma City, a half-court shot just inside a half-court to win a game there. So there have been some moments, but I guess overall it's just any kind of close game that's got a great atmosphere to it that goes back and forth. That's what you kind of live for.
There's been moments like that already this season. I think you mentioned being a Chris Finch fan, thinking they're on the right track there. Anthony Edwards certainly gives reasons for optimism. Just because as you watch this team, maybe we can end with this kind of notion. To me, it feels different, particularly defensively, just the energy they have for whatever reason, just the approach they have, running at shooters. I just haven't seen necessarily that style or that energy in recent years. As you think about this year's team so far, I mean, aside from just personnel, what stands out, if anything, that feels different to you than in some of these years that have gone off the rails?
Yeah, I think you nailed it right there with the defense, Michael. It's just this franchise has only had one top 10 defense in their franchise's history, just one. I mean, that's all the way back in 03-04 when they finished 6th. They haven't had a top 10 defense since, and you've seen enough basketball that that if you don't defend, you're just going to be in these high scoring shootouts, and the Wolves haven't been had enough firepower to compete with opponents in that category. They just haven't had the ability to outscore teams 130 to 125. When you defend in this league, you give yourself a chance to win games. And when the Wolves have done that, when they've defended, they've had a chance to win games. I mean, they're 11-11 now. And they had that rough stretch early in the year where they lost 5 or 6 in a row there, and their defense was just not on point, but they got back to it. And it's really a trend that started in the preseason. They defended really well in the preseason. They started out the season as a top 5 defense. Then they hit that little skid for a while, but now they're back and they're as of this morning, they're 8th in the league in defense. And when you're defending, you just have a chance to win games. And now you give guys like Towns and Russell and Edwards a chance to make plays down the stretch. It seems pretty simple, and it's something I've been talking about for years. Is just you have to be able to defend at some kind of level. You can't continue to be a bottom 10 defense. Even if you're league average, that's something you can build off. Teams have made the postseason, and it's all about making the playoffs, right? So what's the formula there? You have to have some modicum of defense, some level of consistency on that end. And then if you can mix in a top 15 offense, well, now you're in good shape. Now you've given yourself a chance, especially with the play-in games now, including the 9 and 10 seeds, you've got a really good chance to put yourself in the mix. So that's what I'm most encouraged about, is the way that Chris Finch has gotten these guys to defend. And they bought in, and it's almost like a light bulb goes off where they say, wow, look what happens. They're starting to realize that, hey, if we defend and we play like we're capable of, we're going to have a chance to win games. And we like winning games. You get that feeling, that high off of winning games, and you want more of it. And so it kind of builds on itself. And last night against the Wizards was a setback defensively, but they've had kind of those little hiccups, but they've been able to get right back to it.
Well, and they've been missing Jaden McDaniels and Patrick Beverley for some of those recent games too, and those are probably two of their better, most active defensive players. That stat you just pulled out, I did not realize they've only had one top 10 defense. That shocks me based on how good KG was on defense for so many years, that they just hadn't had the complementary defensive pieces around him. And kind of ironic that, they brought in the defensive guru, Tom Thibodeau, and they had some success with him, but didn't have a top defense with him. It was mostly offense the year that they were good. They were fourth in offensive efficiency this year. And now the offensive coach, Chris Finch, gets them to play defense. Yeah,
it's a bizarro world, I guess, or opposite world, as George Costanza would have it on Seinfeld. Tibbs came in and they weren't a good defensive team for his 2+ seasons. He was more effective on the offensive end. But I think that's also speaks to the coaching acumen of those guys. If you're a good coach, you play to your personnel. And while you may be known for offense or defense, these guys are talented enough to recognize what they have and to try to put in the right system to let these guys succeed and lead to team success. And the Wolves desperately do need Pat Beverley back. You mentioned him, and it's incredible, Michael. He'll stop practice. He's like a coach out there. He when he sees something, and his words carry weight too, because he's been where the Wolves want to go. He's had success. He made it to the Western Conference Finals last year. He's one of the top defenders in the league. And while he may be up there at the second half of his career, he can still get after, and he's still a really important part of this team. And they miss him. They miss Jaden McDaniels. And this flu thing is kind of going around, and it's not a lot of teams have depth in this league. And if you lose one starter and then a rotation guy, you might be able to survive for a game or two, but over the long haul, that's tough to overcome. And so hopefully Pat Beverley's been with the team. He's been working out and everything. So hopefully that groin injury that he has, it's not really a long-term situation. I think there's still about another week before we get an update on his status.
Well, we'll see how that goes. We'll see how the Nets game goes on Friday night. Should be a fun one there for you to call. Hopefully you get to see a few more wins this year than you're accustomed to. The rest of the way feels like they're on the right track, but
I think so.
We felt that way before, so we'll just kind of reserve judgment until we see it all play out. But
if we could just stay away from Ed Malloy, Michael, and now Curtis Blair. Curtis Blair was the one who called the non-dunk for Anthony Edmonds.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so he's on the list. He just made my list.
He made your – oh, man. He's on your list. If he's on your list, he's got to watch it.
It's not a good list.
You don't want to be on that list. You're going to become viral for the wrong reasons if you get on Alan Horton's list. Well, Alan, I really enjoyed catching up. This was great. Appreciate it. And, enjoy the rest of the year, all right?
Michael, appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for all the support. And hey, go Wolves.
Yeah, I just didn't have the heart, I guess, to look up what the Wolves' record was in the 14-plus seasons Alan Horton's been here, but he is seeing his share of bad seasons. Happy for him that this team is more relevant. He is a true pro. I like listening to his calls on the radio when I happen to be taking in Wolves games that way. Give them a listen. He is a definite good voice, good guy in this market, and really enjoyed catching up with him on Daily Delivery. It is NFL Picks time on Daily Delivery. Mark Craig joins me as he does most Fridays. Mark, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I am good. I feel like if you're the Vikings, you've got to feel good about the opportunity to get back to 500. You're playing a team that has 0 wins this season, but as I talked about on the Access Vikings podcast on Wednesday, and you wrote in the written version of your picks, playing at Detroit this weekend has got some red flags on it, just based on, Detroit still playing relatively hard this year. They've had a lot of close games, including against the Vikings earlier this year. You've got the Vikings picked, but you've got it in an overtime game. What stands out to you as potential, potential traps in this game for them?
As time expires too, so it's a 21-18 as time expires. So, and I wrote about it on Wednesday. It's like, this is the third time in 20 years that the Vikings have gone to Detroit in December trying to make the playoffs, and they're playing a winless Lions team. 2001. If anybody thinks that a winless team in December isn't trying to win, or there's like more desperate, if you had one loss, you tank it, or you give up. You have no losses. Go back to that 2001. They win. The Lions win 27-24. Denny Green was 5-7. Zimmer's 5-6 right now. Denny got fired 2 weeks later. But just look at the emotion that went into that game for the Lions after that game. Johnny Morton's throwing his helmet way up in the air. There was a guard that said, I think it feels like we won the Super Bowl. And the Lions, 5 of their 10 losses have been one-score losses, and 3 of them have been on last-second field goals, including a record 66-yarder by the best team, the best team with the team with the best record in the AFC, Baltimore, and a 54-yarder by Greg Joseph to save an embarrassment at US Bank Stadium. So this team, they've had some blowouts. They got killed by Philly. But they have played really hard for a team that does not have a win, and they see this. The Vikings see this as a get right game. The Lions see this as an avoid history game, I think, and they're going to play that way.
Yeah, and as we talk about, not just that piece of it, one piece of it that should perhaps concern the Vikings as well, and we're waiting to see who all is available defensively for them in this game. But, with all of the missing pieces they've had on defense and how much they've frankly struggled against the run, even when fully healthy, they weren't a great run defense this season. Detroit runs the ball pretty reasonably well. And if you get into a game where your opponent is running the ball on you, that kind of condenses the game and makes you kind of maximize any opportunities you might have.
I mean, that defensive line last week against the 49ers, those guys played their asses off, but they're not frontline players. And they're, if we're standing around in August watching that team and said, hey, week 13, week 12, Sheldon Richardson's going to be your starting right end. These guys, Tayshaun Bauer is going to be back and playing a significant role after being plucked off the practice squad in New England. They did the best they could, and so they need some reinforcements there. Usually whenever things start to go with this team, go south on this team, it's the run defense, and then suddenly Zimmer, they can't do as much on third downs. It's 3rd and 3 instead of 3rd and 9. The Lions just need a little crack. If the Vikings, what's strange about the Vikings is that typically teams that struggle like they do, they get behind early. Well, they're always ahead. They're always they're still the only team that's led by 7 or more points. They just can't close. So they're Zimmer has their full attention. He hasn't lost them. They play hard, but they can't finish, and they are not good enough to just obviously to just roll out there and beat the Lions. This is going to be. I just wouldn't want any part of this game right now if I was Zimmer, because it's a good game to get right, but being on the road against a team that's this desperate, I don't know. It's a scary game for them.
Yeah, I would think so. And like you said, you've got them picked to win in overtime on the last second. If they miss that field goal, by the way, it's going to be Detroit's second tie of the season. They do have a tie against the Steelers, who the Vikings will play actually less than a week from today, since that's a Thursday night game next week. But a couple chances for getting right for them, but some tricks in there as well. Like you said, Detroit desperate to win, and Pittsburgh, that'll be a short week, so difficult to maybe get ready for that one on a quick turnaround, especially if they're still dealing with some health issues. Don't have a Packers game to talk about this week. They are on a bye. Aaron Rodgers gets a chance to rest his aching, fractured toe. It looks like the best game aside from the Vikings is probably that Patriots versus Bills game. Two of who I'd consider still the top contenders in the AFC. I don't know if there's one favorite over there right now, even if Baltimore has the best record right now. New England's been playing as well as anybody. What, as you look at them and just kind of assess what Belichick has done this season, what stands out to you as being particularly impressive?
It's coaching. It's just anticipating what the other team can do, taking away one part, making them play, as they say, left-handed. And they do that to every team. They don't always win, but they almost beat Brady in the Buccaneers. If they don't miss that field goal at the end off the upright, they beat Brady. So he's the best at plugging pieces in when he loses them, winning without stars, getting everyone together. Mac Jones was the fifth quarterback taken, but if you look at one that fits, coming into the draft, there was a Brady comparison. Well, that's kind of ridiculous, but he's that style. He's not Brady, but he's that style, and he fit. And for him to they didn't have to go get him. There's 4 quarterbacks taken in the first 14 spots, or 11 or whatever it was, and the Patriots sat there and got the guy that fits them and that they knew would fit them because of Belichick, just A, watching how he played at Alabama, and B, the Nick Saban, Bill Belichick relationship. So, he's the coach of the year right now, just based on, what he's been able to do and how fast he's been able to do it. And his track record of them being better in December, always being better in December than they were when they started. So I picked them to beat the Bills until, because they've won 6 in a row, until someone can step up and knock them down again. And I like the Patriots. So
the Patriots escape your the NFL corrects itself kind of theory, right? Belichick is the corollary to that.
Yeah, when he had Brady, it didn't exist. Now it's the way that they've put the 6-game stretch together and where they're going and how they improve, and the way the quarterback is playing. He breaks through that tradition, I guess. Buffalo,
what's going on with them? They looked earlier in the year, maybe things were a little too easy earlier in the year, but earlier in the year, they looked like they were going to be one of the better teams, and they still might end up getting there, but they've had this kind of lull in the middle of the season. Josh Allen has had, some turnover problems, reverting a little bit to pre-2020 form. What do you see from them that, I'm assuming this pick is more Patriots driven than Bills driven, but if they were going better, this might be a pick in their direction since they're the home team.
Yeah, I think it would be. They're a tough team to figure out. I think I picked them to beat the Colts maybe 2 weeks ago, and they get blown out. So they're a team, I think, that's still young, and the quarterback's still young enough. They're still learning how to win. They're, getting there is sometimes easier for these teams than staying there. As the Vikings have found out every other year, you get there and then you step back. You get there and you step back. And now, a lot of it's injury related for the Vikings, but there's a lot of injuries all over this league. And the Bills are just a team that's probably still learning how to be consistent. They get blown out by the Colts, and then they come back on Thanksgiving and win by a blowout. So, yeah, I would not be surprised if they won the game, or I would be surprised if they blew the Patriots out, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a close game and they win, because they probably are they are the more talented team, I think, but I think the Patriots are the better coached and the better overall. They just know how to win, and that's why I like them.
Last one. Speaking of knowing how to win, you've got upset special 49ers at Seahawks. You like the Seahawks in this one, which would be good for the Vikings. Seahawks used to doing a lot of winning, haven't done it so much this year. Is this one of those overcorrection kind of games since San Francisco's won 3 in a row?
Yeah, I will say that Belichick falls outside the correction zone, but Jimmy Garoppolo is in the sweet spot of a correction zone. They've won 3 in a row. Certainly wasn't because of Jimmy Garoppolo last week, especially in the first half. They got rolling with that offensive line that, I know Zimmer brought it up, and they are grabby, and they, maybe other teams need to teach how to do what they're doing when it comes to that, to get away with it, because it's only a penalty if they call it, I guess. But yeah, they just don't strike me as a team. It's just they've arrived, and now they're gonna run the table. Now this is at least the second time I have picked Seattle. I picked Seattle to play like Seattle in Seattle, and I've been let down. So I may put them in my Lions category. Like when I picked them, the Lions to beat Philadelphia in an upset special, I vowed never to pick them again. So this is Seattle's chance. Believe it or not, Seattle's still in this thing. I think in the NFC, I think only the Lions are the team that's out of it. I mean, it's obviously Seattle's got to change in a hurry, but this could be a win. This could be a big win for them and a huge loss for the 49ers.
I should note you're 6-5 in your upset specials straight up. You've slipped a little bit. So I'd like to see you get back on the winning streak with that. You're ahead of the Vikings, but you're still falling a little bit on those upset specials.
I score first. I give up a touchdown before halftime. I frantically flail in the second half, and then I either win or lose on the last. So, except for Philadelphia when they destroyed my upset special against the Lions.
You're in every game, Mark, and that's what's important. We'll see where it gets you at the end of the year. Well, thanks. Good stuff. We'll do this again next week. All right.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
Now, we haven't done our dings of concern for a long time, but let me play a couple of right now. Yeah, that signifies the fact that Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr were held out of practice on Thursday. Maybe just maintenance. Maybe at least Kendricks will be back in. Sounds like Dalvin Tomlinson and Michael Pierce sure could be back for Sunday's game. That would help out in the run. But a lot of guys missing still on this Vikings team, specifically on the defense. You'd like to think doesn't really matter against Detroit, but I'm still very worried about this game, and I think a lot of other people are as well. Let's finish with the cooler. Brian Kelly, new LSU head coach, was born in Massachusetts. According to Wikipedia, raised in a Catholic Irish-American family in Massachusetts, attended a prep school in Danvers. His father was a Boston politician. This is not a man who grew up with a Southern accent. He's been coaching at Notre Dame, Cincinnati, Central Michigan. He's been in the Midwest, the West, the East, somewhere in between there, pretty much his whole life. He gets to LSU, and what does he do? He puts on a fake Southern accent. Roll the clip.
It's a great night to be a Tiger. I'm here with my family, and we are so excited to be in the great state of Louisiana, but more importantly, to be with you great fans.
I guess I can't blame a guy for trying to fit in, but that is the first time I've ever heard Brian Kelly talk that way. Maybe that's just going to be a new thing now that he's down at LSU, just trying to become one of the group down there in Louisiana. That'll do it for today. That'll do it for the week. Go back and listen if you missed. Good stuff all week. Should be fun next week as well. Patrick Royce on Monday. Lots of stuff happening next week as well. Going to have a lot of great stuff lined up for you. Have a great weekend. We'll be back at it on Monday.